Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of A Few Choice Words podcast. I am dog sitting. This is my niece, Peaches, and this is my nephew, Lightning. And what I want to talk about today, it's been a while. You know, new setup, new camera. I think I've used this microphone before, new guest, but I think I just want to, have a chat and really kind of just get back to the basics of things because I think, when you think about things, like really think about it, things are crazy. And I think it's just so crazy when you think about it, just like really how crazy things have gotten. And what's really crazy to me is when we kind of when we kind of get into these sort of places and spaces, I think it's so important to remember who you are. I think we really get away from that a lot of times. And as an individual and as a woman, and I think just too, like, as a woman, especially in the spaces that I'm in, you really have to be able to think about things from a point of view that oftentimes is a lot different from other point of views. And I think it really is so important to understand where you are and where you're coming from, but you also have to then be willing to understand even where others are coming from. And I think that's just so important, especially today and, the times that we're living in, right? I think it's really crazy and even profound when you think about like if you really want to go there, if you really think about all the people who have gone before us, all of the pioneer men and women who have, really paved the way and made it so that we can be where we are, right? And I think when you look at things in that way, it really makes you thankful, and it makes you really grateful, and it makes you really blessed because I think, when we kind of look at all of these things and really think about things, you just have to be able to think about things in the way that they are being thought of and in the way that they're not being thought of, because I think when you really think about it, it's oftentimes hard to think about a lot of these thoughts and to be able to place them and pinpoint them and think about them in such a way that is thought provoking, right? And I honestly think that's just, these are the things that we have to be thinking about in order to move forward in this day and age. And when I think about that, for me, like, just thinking about my life and where I've been and what I've done and what I've seen and who I've become, even, like, it's very, it takes you back. When you take a step back, it really takes you back. And I'm thankful, I'm so thankful. And even this platform, and to be able to have the space to speak, to be able to interact, to be able to, think about these things and speak about them in such a way that connects you to others. Because I think it really, when you are connected to others, it is just so connecting. And that's so key for me. Like, I think a lot of times things feel locked, and you have to be willing to do the hard work of finding those keys. And once you find the keys, you have to test them in the lock to see if it'll even open. And what's crazy is sometimes even when you find the key, right? When you go through all the keys and you find the one that fits in, sometimes you turn it and it still won't unlock. And I think a lot of times it's when we get so close to opening that door, right? That it seems like, so I think that's really what I want to say. And something, if I could just be honest, something that is so hard for a lot of people is, it's one of those key things of being a key person, And I think when you gather keys, the more keys you have, the bigger keychain you need. And a lot of times when you're traveling, I think it's so significant how at like little shops and things, like when you're traveling and such, one of the main things that people will sell are keychains, right? But I think that's so significant and so profound, even like in all of these different things that we do in our life. It's almost like we're picking up keys along the way, right? We're putting them on our keychain, and I think it's really beautiful how you can find keychains at so many of these places. But at the same time, at what point is that a good looking keychain? And at what next point is that keychain no longer effective because you've picked up so many keys? But I even think it's when we're thinking about that in relation to all of these different things, you have to remember, if you get a lot of keys, you have to remember the key to your house, right? Like, you have to be able to remember, like, even though I'm picking up all of these things and these keys might look similar, I have to know the main keys that get me to where I always need to go. And I think that's really significant, when you compare that to everything that we're seeing, everything that we're hearing, everything that we're feeling and experiencing, and everything that we're sharing, even everything that we get to share with others. I think that's so beautiful, but it's a great reminder for me, even, just with everything that I've seen and everything that I've done and everywhere that I've been and everywhere that I've gone. It's really beautiful to think about sometimes, like, these are the keys that I have, and I found them. Some were given to me, and even some I've given away. I think that's really important too, and that's something we don't talk about a lot. Like, there are points when there are certain things you have to give up, and it's really imperative to me that when we are going through these different things in these different places, in these different seasons of life, we have to be able to know what keys do we no longer need. Like, it's sometimes it's one of those things where when you move out of a house, not all the time do you turn in the key for whatever reason. But like, what are you going to do with that key? Is it just going to be a memory? Is it going to get lost somewhere in the midst of things? Or are you going to make a decision to get rid of that key, right? And I think even to when we're thinking about like homes and things and doors, it also makes me think a lot about like carpentry in the whole building process. And if you're someone like me, I think it's really interesting to think about building and not only what are you building, but how are you building? Where are you building? There's so many different factors that go into the building process that we have to be okay with and knowing and understanding. I'm not just going to get to the house, right? And that could mean so many different things depending on where you're coming from or how you're looking at it. But it's really funny actually when you think about it and when you like really pay attention to it. It's so crazy. Like when you're building, you have to think about all of these different key pieces to be able to build that thing that you are building to make it built, right? And that's something that I have really spent a lot of time with. It's a discovery process, you know. You have to be willing. Excuse me. You have to be willing to, and I've talked about this before. You have to be willing to take the time to say it with me. Take the time, right? And I think that's so interesting and significant how it takes time to build things. And when when you have the time, you have to make the decision on how you're going to spend that time, right? Because we all have the same amount of hours in a day, and what I do with my time versus what you do with your time is very important and very significant and very key, right? So when we're thinking about that in relation to everything that we've been talking about and thinking about, I want us to think about this. How do we as people, as humans, as citizens, how do we go from point A to point B? It's really profound if you think about it, because there's point A, right? And there's point B, but there's all this space in between. And depending on what point A is and what point B is, the amount of space in between those 2 points could be very big or very small. But it's up to us to know how much space is here and how much time is that going to take. And even to tie it all back in, this is so crazy. What are the keys that I'm going to need to take with me? But what are the keys that I'm going to be picking up along the way? So I think that Peaches, please. I think that's really significant for me. Like when you think about it, to be able to know where to go and to be able to think about how you're going to grow. So I think that's really just what I want to say. So thank you guys so much for watching. I love these episodes. They are just really such a great time for me, just to be my own person and to be who I am, but to be able to share that with other people, I think is just really significant. And I think, and I think it's just really important. And you have to be able to think about too, you know, in the grand scheme of things and in life, there's a lot of choices that we'll make, and there's a lot of things that we'll do to be able to know what to do. So let me know if there are certain things. I know it's been a while, and I hope my camera hasn't been crooked the whole time, but Peaches, she's peeing. I gotta go.